Welcome to our podcast with Business Standard Blueprint. I am Bhashwar Kumar, Defense Correspondent for Business Standard, and we have with us today Mr. Arun T Ramchandani, Senior Vice President, Precision Engineering and Systems for Larsen Toubro. Welcome, Mr. Ramchandani.
Hi, Bhashwar. Good to be here.
So, just to start with, if for the benefit of our viewers and readers, could you tell us something about yourself? How long you've been in the business of defense manufacturing and securing India and making weapons for our forces?
So, let me start by saying that it's a long story. And it's long because I have been around for 4 decades with L&T and pretty much for most of this time with the defense industry. So, I joined the company in 1984. And it was around 1986, 87 when we started doing work for defense for the IGMDP program. So that's when Dr. Kalam realized that there is a need to involve the private sector in the program. And you can see how much of a visionary he was, because it was only till in 2001 that the government opened up the sector for the private industry.
So, just for the benefit of our viewers and readers again, you're referring to our missile development program,
Which is right, which
which has given us the Agnis and the ballistic missiles that we have today.
Absolutely. So it was called the IGMDP, or the Integrated Guided Missile Development Program, which had 5 missiles in the program. And all of them today we have that, and we have many variants. And today India has quite an advanced missile program. We, of course, were roped in to do the ground systems. So let's just say that I've been around 36, 37, maybe close to 40 years. I've seen the industry grow. The early days were with DRDO, then with the Navy, and now, of course, it's totally opened up. Just to roll back a little, before I joined, L&T did support India's space program and the nuclear power program. So a lot of those equipment were built in our factories in Mumbai at Powai. And from then on, it seemed like a natural progression to support India's defense and security needs. And that's how we got involved.
So, lots of secrets. And we have to be very careful what we ask you.
I'll just say that, I form part of a business called Precision Engineering and Systems. So at the core, we are engineering people. We believe in precision as part of our capability. And we've contributed that skills of precision engineering to defense and security. Just to be clear, we don't make bombs, we don't build explosives, we don't do anything destructive, but there is a lot more to defense per se.
And to securing the nation.
Absolutely.
So, it's the interesting thing that stands out to me is that it's a 4-decade journey for you.
That's right.
And 4 decades means that you have been, as you pointed out, that you were here in this business, in this industry, before it was opened up to the private sector formally.
That's right.
At a time when it was just the preserve of the DPSUs, of the public defense firms. And that puts you in a very unique place for what we're going to ask you next. So that would mean you've seen how the private industry has been let into this sector and how it has grown. So if you could give us some sense of that, not just for L&T, but for the whole sector. Because 2002 or so is when it's opened up, but 2014, 15, 16 is when we really see production ramp up. So there was that period where industry is digesting the fact that they're figuring out what to do. So where would you place the industry today? Is it still in its nascent phase? Is it maybe just waiting for launch, for boost phase? Where are we right now?
So let me first look back a little bit and give you a small historical perspective, and then evaluate where we stand today. So pre-2001, really we worked with the DRDOs, and we really got a chance to work on development. And again, we did R&D ahead of our times. The industry per se at that time was made up of many small players who were clustered around, let's say, DRDO labs, around the DPSUs, or the defense public sector undertakings, as you call them. Each had a very limited supply chain. If you look at even HAL, yeah, probably even today, they do most of their work in-house, and relied on smaller industries that were clustered around them to support them. 2001 was the opening up. They started issuing licenses for doing defense manufacturing, and the sector even today is licensed. That is,
In fact, as the secretary points out, we are the only sector where the license Raj still exists.
Okay. So you can't just wake up out of bed today and say, I'm going to start a defense business. You have to get industrial licenses for it, which, of course, in this whole journey of ease of doing business, is not such a big deal today. And when the sector opened up, we sought licenses for virtually every segment under the sector, whether it is land, sea, air, etc. Now remember that the private industry was a nascent player. Most of the activities happened in the MSME sector, and as we kind of got in, it was early days for the industry. We were up against a very established setup. There was a way of order placement with the public sector units. It was not
Infamous nominations,
yeah,
nominated orders.
So there were companies which did certain things, and they got those orders. So we had to really step in and get into being a part of this whole thing. We started with a huge handicap, with players who were established, who had factories set up, who were executing contracts, and we had to build all that ecosystem as we went along. So that was, I would say, the phase till about 2014 or maybe 2016-17. Big orders were not easy to come by, and we really had to rely on supporting the public sector undertakings or DRDO.
Something which has now changed. There are large orders, at least for you, L&T, and for Kalyani, at least what comes from the top of my mind. At least these two private companies have now secured large orders.
Exactly.
These might not be as large as, let's say, an order for a Tejas, which goes into 40-50,000 crores, but it is substantial compared to what we used to have before. So would you say that was the inflection point once these orders start coming in?
So for us, some of the breakthrough orders, one was the Pinaka system, which came in the early 2000s, but it was a long journey from starting development in 1987 to starting production well into the 2000s. So that was let's say an initial breakthrough order. We started doing work for the Navy as well. Navy was building ships in the Indian shipyards, and that really gave us an opportunity to try out some of our DRDO experience, going to the Navy saying, look, we can upgrade some of your weapon systems, we can replace some of the systems that are of old heritage and you're not able to support it. And that's how we started building rocket launchers for the Navy. We started building torpedo launch systems for the Navy, and made breakthroughs. And it was only in 2017 when we got the order for the K9 Vajra, that which was at that time the largest
order for a private sector company in defense.
And it was a 4,500 crore order. And
it would be years before it would be eclipsed by another order which was larger for the private sector.
We did that, with some of our own orders which followed up, like the close-in weapon systems.
Exactly.
and the high power radars and all that. But so that's how the things have evolved. Today, I would say that a lot of the handicap that we started with in 2001, those have gone away. Nominations, the government has, is now opening up the sector completely for competition. I can't say that there is zero nomination. There are a lot of legacy orders which get repeated and it's hard to break into it. But the whole environment is to encourage competition, and that is what
So would you then say that the private sector at least is poised for takeoff, that it just needs the right push, the right ignition?
So today, if you see out of the volume of defense production that happens in the country, the private sector contribution is 20 to 25%.
And the defense minister is on record asking the private sector to double this share.
Exactly.
I think in 3 years' time or so, he said.
So I would say it may take a little longer than that, but the trajectory is very much for the private share to increase. I think.
And you already dominate the share in exports. So while you may not account for the lion's share of domestic overall production in the country in defense, you do. The private sector does dominate in exports.
It's the other way around. It's 2/3 private sector, 1/3 public sector. And while the public sector is also looking to grow in exports, and once we start exporting bigger systems, then the scale could change and the ratios could change. But today the private sector is dominant in the defense export.
And some of your peers have already bagged export orders for complete systems. We won't get into the details.
Yes.
I'm also sure you won't tell us which orders you might be close to bagging when it comes to complete systems. I understand that there is some confidentiality there.
The export market does have some.
But we have friendly foreign countries. There is interest which has been expressed, and we've seen.
And we've seen growth in defense exports, no doubt.
So what I'm understanding from what you've just said, that we are indeed poised for a launch. If the right push is given, there can be quite exponential growth, in fact, could be possible. So that actually brings us to what we're really here to discuss. Now, credit to the government. This is an initiative which started before Operation Sindoor. So it's not something which has been prompted by a sudden emergency. When the previous year began in January, the Year of Reforms initiative was announced. And the sort of rules that we have that dictate defense acquisition, how we buy our weapons, the procedures involved in selecting them, testing them, the timelines, the government committed to crunching all of these. And we did see some progress. And in some cases, I think the new manual for procuring capital procurement it's not here yet, but it's what sources tell us it's ready for launch. So, as you've said, a lot of the handicaps that you faced have been removed. It's taken a decade, but it has happened. And when I say decade, I'm counting from 2014-15 when actual production starts. And now we have this reforms impetus. So that brings us to first the most crucial question, that as a person who's been in this industry for 4 decades, what does reform even mean to you? What do you think of when you think reform?
So, you talked about the way defense acquisition happens. The way a defense industry is built in the country, a so-called defense industrial complex is created. Now, things have changed. From the time where only an ordnance factory or a DPSU could produce equipment, where design happened only in the DRDOs and in some naval directorate. I think all of that is getting transformed. The way the procurement is done, from an indent based, you would place an indent on an ordnance factory to supply certain goods, to a competitive bidding process, to the hierarchy of procurement. We talk, today there are different categories of procurement, with the IDDM or Indian designed, developed and manufactured equipment being the highest category of equipment. So the government is saying that today, if I want to procure something, I will first look if that is available in the Indian designed, developed and manufactured. Only then I will look beyond that, whether the equipment should
So
be.
you're being accorded priority.
So there is
Indian companies, both public and private.
Yeah.
And we see that even in the budgeting.
absolutely.
When we have the modernization component, which again, for the benefit of our viewers and readers, that's the part of the budget which is actually used out of even the capital expenditure, which is actually used for buying weapons and systems.
Absolutely.
And you see there's a certain percentage, a very large 75% being the normative, being
Yes.
the norm, which is earmarked for domestic procurement.
Absolutely.
Out of which also there is another carve out which is specifically for the private sector.
Yes.
So the sense that I get is that we are seeing basically the base has been laid. And I think you've got a vote of confidence last year again, where when the government said that they are, at least they believe that private companies can even build a stealth aircraft in this country, that they have perhaps the potential, the capacity. That leads me to first a very short question. Do you think there's any sort of system that the private sector can't build in this country? Would you say that we can build, if given the right impetus, we can build the tanks, we can build the stealth jets, the ships, the submarines, the new age drones, autonomous systems? Is there any area which you actually think that with accounting for the proper impetus, that our private sector would not be able to make?
So, Bhaswar, I don't think it's a question of capability. It's a question of the scale of the market, which would then drive you to invest in R&D, would drive you to invest into production techniques which can be scaled. So that's one thing. It's the visibility and scale of the market, which is one aspect of it. It is the impetus for R&D which is very important, because defense equipment is very niche equipment, and one has to be very clear in investing into building those niche capabilities, which a lot of the Western world has many years of head start with respect to us. So I don't think we don't have the capability. The private sector certainly has the capability. It's a question of opportunity and support. Worldwide, the leading weapon systems have been built by government support, though it is built in the private sector. If Boeing or a Northrop Grumman.
And to be fair, companies like yours they've been actually very good at working with DPSUs and with DRDO. You've worked hand in hand to create. So, for example, I'm sure it's public knowledge now, the Zorawar light tank is one such example. And I think the speed at which it went from design to prototype was actually astonishing. I think
It is.
People who are used to seeing the Indian time scale, of weapons development, to put that without, any offense, would be very surprised. I think 2.5 years.
So in 2 years, we had, we moved from drawing board to prototype, which is extremely amazing to really have a product out there.
That's globally competitive, I would think.
I would say it beats global benchmarks, okay, because it was driven by the need of the circumstances. At that point in time, there was a need to get equipment up into the high altitudes very quickly. So there was a push, and we did that. We put out a product. Now, between a product conceptualization to product maturity, there is a cycle, and we've moved on that curve, and we need to move into refinements, improvement, the Mark II of the product, and all this cycle needs to be compressed.
Yeah, and that's a long tail of R&D. Exactly. And that's where, so it brings to the point that you'd raised, that things have opened up, but you really need to find avenues for financing this R&D.
Yes.
And you're right, globally, there is a lot of government support which goes in. And it's not necessarily very large investment. Often there's an outsized outcome of very targeted, relatively small investments which can lead to outsized returns. Yes. So that brings us again back to what we were thinking of in terms of reforms. So would you say that it's one thing to change procedures of acquisition, of timelines, of how long it takes to test something, how it's tested. Would you say then we need perhaps the next generation of reforms as this is happening, and we're very sure that will happen because of the Year of Reforms initiative? Do you think it's time to think of the next generation of reforms which deal with R&D, which deal with financing, which deal with perhaps, taking a product from its nascent stage to maturity, where it becomes a full-fledged system?
So, once the private sector came in, then India adopted the defense procurement procedures, which morphed into the defense acquisition procedures in 2020. And we will see a new procedure in 2020, which was targeted for 2025. We'll see it in this financial year.
I think it's a month or two away.
I'm sure the government will announce it. I know it's in a very advanced stage. And it's been an evolution of how defense acquisition will happen. From procurement to acquisition has been one transition.
It's a psychological change. There's a directional indicator there.
There is a directional indicator. And but still, we are procedure driven. We are buyer dominated, to where now the buyer and seller are part of the same ecosystem. And procurement has to be fast, it has to be capability driven. We are still in the age of L1 procurement. We are still in a state of buyer dominated procurement, which we are constantly refining the procedures to make it more open, etc. But if you're looking at defense acquisition, actually you're buying or you're acquiring capabilities for defense of the country. And I think that's a whole different ball game. You're not going, when you're looking at acquiring capability for the country, you're not looking at what is the cheapest product available, what is my, the cheapest source of getting something.
Or at least that cannot be the only or the most important indicator.
Of course, cost is, you want maximum security capability with whatever budgets you can afford. So the whole thing is that how do I get value for what I invest into? How are my products contemporary? How is my security preparedness, contemporary? And you have to build that ecosystem. And the conventional procurement process, which depends on competitive buying, on a kind of auctioning or trying to find the cheapest way to get something done, is probably not the acquisition mindset.
That can't be the primary objective. Yeah. And the world over, there are very few companies, for example, which can provide certain products. Yeah. You are not going to be able to negotiate with them on an even footing and get the best price that you wanted. I'm sure that we've faced that in our foreign procurement. So I think you're pointing to something very interesting, which is that we are often said, we are often told that our procedures aren't really that bad. If you look at the DAP 2020, the Defense Acquisition Procedure 2020, the procurement timeline is actually not, the timeline that it stipulates is not that bad. Yes. It's in the implementation, the practice of it, that problems occur. I think what you are pointing to, and without any without any prejudice, I think what you're saying is that perhaps a change in perspective would be the true reform. Yes. Where you set the priority order correct, that this is what I actually buy these systems for, and therefore I should go about doing it in this particular way. Am I getting you right?
Absolutely. So, which is what I'm saying, that the next level of reforms has to be at a mindset level and not at a procedural level. There has to be more inherent trust in the process. So any process which differentiates a buyer from a seller, which has at its basis that the buyer is trying to make the most out of the transaction, and it's so transactional, would probably not yield the best results. Of course, on the other hand, there are risks of monopolistic buying situations which has to be corrected by having one or more than one capable source. But it's all about building capability. It's all about getting the right things in, identifying capability and taking
So
it
that,
to the market.
since we're talking of a change in mindset being what we require going forward, and I think to be fair, we're seeing that.
We are seeing
I
that.
think then you would have been very heartened again by what we mentioned earlier, what happened last year, to open up a competition like the AMCA, which is a stealth aircraft, something we have never made to date, to open it up to the private sector and to have that confidence that these companies can come in and they can compete. And there can be arguments on whether, how the competition is structured or how it's going to go through. But the fact that there was that, leap of faith, as one would say, taken. And also very heartening to see that the private companies came in and they all tied up, many of them, not all, but some of them tied up with public sector companies so that they would have, a synergy of capabilities to bring to the table and to say, okay, look, we can build something which is cutting edge, which is still today across the world considered cutting edge. So would you say then that's the sort of mindset change you're talking about?
So I think the AMCA program is a wonderful example of this mindset shift. So look at it that if somebody has to build a fifth generation fighter aircraft, where HAL is today with these years of experience in building aircrafts, helicopters, the kind of infrastructure that they have, it would be very difficult to create a level playing competition. You might open it up, but clearly the kind of assembly lines that they have, the manufacturing infrastructure, the experience, all of that gives them a huge advantage. Now what the government has done, they said that firstly we are going to get you in at the development phase. So it's not that we are opening up some manufacturing thing, but we are going to involve you in the development phase and then you will take over production. For the development phase, the government said we will set up the infrastructure. So now with that just one
You
stroke,
can see that they're looking at all the factors and they're making sure that they're going to, when they say that it's going to be open, they're trying their best
they're
to
trying
keep
to
it open.
leveling it. So now, if you had infrastructure, you no longer have the advantage because the initial aircrafts which will get certified, the prototype aircrafts, the certification aircraft, will all be built in a government facility. So with one stroke, they've equalized all the players. And that has made things very different. They also encourage consortiums. So they had a marking system which gave weightage to, if you had a partner, you had chances of getting higher scores. So with all of this, I think it's driven the ecosystem, it's strengthened the whole ecosystem, it's brought people together, and it's brought them on a real even keel. So to that extent, I think it's a great shift in mindset. The outcome of all this could be that HL
And
may
I
end
must
up.
confess, when I use the term leap of faith, that's not my term. It's something that someone in the Ministry of Defense told me.
Yeah.
That opening up AMCA was a leap of faith for us.
Absolutely.
And that implies that they took a risk. So would it be correct to say that when you talk about a change in mindset, you're talking about more risk tolerance?
Absolutely.
Because we're going to have to do it now. We're in a world which is, as the chiefs of our forces have stated, as the secretary himself has stated on various occasions, it's a more volatile world. And you don't need them to say it. You can look at the news, read the news every day. You'll know that it's volatile.
You can't be driven by a procedural kind of thing when you're looking at security of your nation. It's just as simple as that.
So risk appetite.
Risk ability, the judgment, the acquisition system forces you to go by the book and not use judgment. The judgment of the buyer is very critical. The experience and capability of the person doing the procurement is very critical.
And we're seeing those changes now with the AMCA program. You're seeing at least a start where they're saying, look, okay, we'll take this risk. Let's see
Yes.
if it pays off. And it very well might. We don't know what the outcome is yet, but when it comes out, it very well might that we would have a private sector combat aircraft manufacturer in the country, which would be a very big thing because it's been a monopoly to date, and for good reason, because HAL was the only player there and they did service for the nation by doing that. But we would have an alternative, we would have more production capacity, which is never bad, in this case at least.
If India has to build its aircraft squadron gap, there has to be a higher scale of production.
So this also brings us to something which is the government's stated aim, a dual production pipeline. So I put that in quotes because that's what the government wants in defense, where the silos are broken down and the public and the private sector work hand in hand. Again, as we mentioned, to some extent, we're already seeing that. If not exactly with DPSUs, at least with the government labs. For example, Zorawar is a joint development.
Absolutely.
The guns, the artillery guns that have now been ordered are also a joint development. Same with assault rifles, which have been, at least part of those assault rifles were developed between DRDO and a private company. So what comes to your mind when someone says we want a dual production pipeline, and how would one go about enabling that?
So wherever there is opportunity for scale, we must look at, dual production pipeline, because many of these platforms are long gestation projects. And, if you just have one line of production and you have a series to be built, whether it is regiments in the army or squadrons in the air force or a class of ships in the navy, you can just accelerate the production by having two lines. And I believe opportunities exist, whether it is submarines, whether it is fighter aircrafts, whether it is battle tanks. Probably there is a game for having two lines. What the challenge we have in India also is that many times our procurement is so fragmented, everybody wants to do everything, and we have, small contracts with a number of people involved. So probably, I think effort is required from the industry side also to kind of channelize this towards two lines of production for critical...
For people to figure out their lanes.
And then to create a structured, tiered industry. And of course, then to have a strong innovation ecosystem. So today we are seeing a large startup ecosystem getting built, and which is an innovation layer. Within the MSMEs, we are seeing good amount of innovation.
That actually brings me to a very interesting point. So, when you said that one of the challenges is finding R&D funding, when we look at abroad, for example, because of what happened between Russia and Ukraine, we see this in Europe, and it had started a little earlier in America, but again, it gained prominence because of Ukraine, which is that you have these startups which have scaled up, like an Anduril, where it is just their own money. They raise the money. They don't depend on any orders being placed with them. They will do the R&D on their own, create a product, and then sell it off the shelf, where they take the product, say, okay, you need this. I am telling you, you need this. Test it out, see if you like it. I'm sure you will. And if you like it, you buy it from us. I know that's risky. But when we say that there is a need to have risk appetite in terms of reforms, in terms of policy, where we're mostly talking about the policy makers, do you think there is some scope for this sort of risk appetite within the industry too? Not just for startups, but for larger players?
So there is, and all of us are looking at it, and we are doing it. Sometimes within our own R&D setups, sometimes in a collaborative environment with startups. So certainly there is, but we should also realize that defense products, like I said, are very niche products, and there is a need for creating patient capital, making available patients' capital for people to utilize, so that the appetite to do more R&D grows.
And maybe off-the-shelf works for a drone, probably would not work for a very expensive manned combat aircraft, for example, or a ship.
And from an innovative idea to a reliable field product is a long journey which requires good infusion of capital all along the way. You have to keep building prototypes, you have to keep testing, you have to keep refining the product, you have to keep upgrading the product to keep pace with the technology, and all of that requires big funds. So either you end up creating very expensive products, or you create a mechanism which can support this journey and can make it more effective and productive.
So with this, we are coming towards the end of our interaction and taking things in a different direction. So you have, again, as we pointed out, 4 decades of experience in this industry, which is very niche, it's very complex. It's had its challenges, its ups and downs. It's had its moments of success, like Operation Sindoor, where we saw Indian weapons or made in India weapons being deployed with success. So when you take all of that, for the benefit of our viewers and our readers, when you look at the future of securing India, what comes to your mind? What's going to happen? If you're to read the tea leaves, I know you may not want to, but just not business wise. I mean, just in terms of securing India, what do you see happening?
So I see a lot of transformations happening, which to me are very positive signals. I see an innovation ecosystem getting created. I see the government wanting to support this ecosystem. I see the private industry playing a bigger role, and I see the opportunity for public-private partnerships, really growing and developing. And probably over time, I see a broader whole-of-nation approach to this, to the entire defense sector, which I think augurs well for us. At times, I think we have to be open to technology moves which are happening outside the country as well. We have to see how we can benefit from that and how we can adapt those things into our systems. Maybe opportunities for joint ventures, but joint ventures not in the old way where you did development abroad and you did licensed production in India, but a world of co-development, co-production, which would then broaden up the markets as well. So just relying on one customer, which is the Indian government, may not be enough. We have to look at more innovation.
So the sense that I'm getting is you see a bright future. I'm sure there'll be challenges and hurdles, which there always are.
Yes.
Especially when you're dealing with something as complex and vital as security. But broadly, you see a brighter future with the base having been laid. Yes. And that brings us to the absolute last question we have for you. And this has nothing to do particularly with defense, although it depends on your answer. We don't generally do this, but knowing you, having spoken to you for so long, we've had our interactions. For our viewers and our readers, are there any books that you're reading currently? Anything that has captured your mind? Something that you've read by recently? I mean, even the last few months that you would recommend to them? Something that would, from the world of business, maybe something to do with the specific sector you're in, or maybe just fiction. Anything that comes to mind?
So, I mean, in the last few months, I haven't been reading a lot, so I can't say that there is something that I would clearly recommend to the readers. But what really is occupying my mind is how to drive more of innovation into the way we work and how we do things, and that's something that I've been looking at quite closely.
So we should be careful. That means you've been making business moves, and as a reporter, I should be looking out for news.
So we will see. And like I said, we are very buoyant about the sector. We are buoyant about the opportunities that it gives. And we believe that the environment is good for the industry to take off.
It's been a long journey, but I think we've put some of those blocks in place. Because when you see it, I know people are impatient. Where is it? But actually, it's been less than 10 years since the private sector has really started building, and their growth has been actually, if you look at it from that time frame, yes, it's actually quite fast. Because today you have a private sector player that makes a tank, a light tank, but a tank. You have a private sector player which makes artillery guns, assault rifles, and then there are projects of strategic importance that one can't get into, but we know that there are private players who are involved And those are systems and platforms which are of a different level of complexity altogether.
Certainly.
So I think we are in agreement here then.
For sure.
Not much to dispute.
Not at all.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us for the Blueprint podcast. And thank you for your time, Mr. Ramchandani.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
Thank you.